Hello and welcome to this webinar in manufacturing from Yon Reality. My name is Mats Johansson. I'm the president and co-founder of Yon Reality. And I've spent the last 20 plus years working in VR and AR, so virtual reality and augmented reality. And I must say, I can't think of a more exciting time to be involved in this line of work. We have a number of pivotal technologies for the future that are converging. Thinking of course, our field, AR and VR, coupled together with cloud computing, IoT, artificial intelligence, this connected with a large number of great AR and VR devices that are out on the market or are coming out on the market in the next few years. It really makes it a lot easier for manufacturing companies and others to take advantage of VR and AR for knowledge transfer, which is our business. So with that, today we're going to talk specifically about manufacturing, and I'll start with a little bit of an introduction. And one thing I wanted to touch on, I mentioned we work with knowledge transfer, and this boils down to training for industry or education. Although education, primarily what we do is vocational education, it's pretty close. So why do we do this? The reason is that you can learn better, faster, remember longer using VR and AR. And this is not just something we say at Yon, but this is something that's been confirmed by Harvard, UNESCO, BBC, United Nations, or a number of different studies. And there are more. I picked a few here, but I wanted to kind of set the table with that. A lot of training today, especially when we talk about technicians, manufacturing technicians, operators, is done in a very theoretical way, and it's a very hands-on profession. Well, VR and AR lets you be very hands-on without taking the risk or the investment in infrastructure, and you can train over and over again. So this is a very important point. Let me talk a little bit about the company. We've been around for quite a while. I helped start the company in 1999 in Irvine, California, where I'm calling on you today. We very early on developed a focus on enterprise and education, and we'll talk much more about this, but our primary product solution today is the AVR platform, augmented and virtual reality, so we make it seamless to do both AR and VR. We've also developed the largest network in the world to deploy and develop content. We put together a strong management team with a lot of industry vertical expertise. Even if we know AR, VR, software modeling, hardware, as good as anyone in the world, I would say, we know that this segment specific expertise is crucial when you talk about areas like manufacturing, for instance, and many others. Let's talk a little bit about our strategy. One of our biggest components of the strategy, and we'll touch more on this, is what we call Human 2.0. Basically to empower the world's workers and students to grow beyond their current constraints. And we think that primarily AR will be pivotal in making this happening over the next 10, 20 years. So this is a long-term endeavor. And I'll come back to that one a little bit. And we do this through our AVR platform, which is an innovative man-machine knowledge transfer solution comprised of what we call virtual trainer, allows for remote virtual training. AR, knowledge injection, or AR assist, allows you to deliver knowledge content right then and there in the field to technicians, for instance, or students. and then creator, which is a simple to use creation component. And I have a little video here. I'd like to play that to just put this in context because it's really important as we move forward. So hopefully that gave you a good context of the key components we're talking about here today with regards to the AVR platform. We'll come to many more examples and see how companies actually use this and talk a little bit more specifics. But virtual trainer, AR assist, and creator are key components of this. The third one is IDC. It's when you start to look at scaling, and we have many large manufacturing companies that may have dozens of major manufacturing hubs around the world. They have thousands of operators, assembly workers, whatever it may be, and a lot of different products. So at the end of the day, it takes on the content or the production side, it takes a lot of resources to do this. And even for one large manufacturer, it's hard for a small studio to do this. So we started something going back now 5 years where we started building interactive digital centers around the world. And today we have the largest network of trained, certified developers, project managers, artists that back this strategy up. And that is very, very, very pivotal to be able to scale. And I'll talk a little bit more about this network that we're building. But these are Yon certified centers that can support and develop content for our customers around the world. Finally, in terms of focus, having been around for, I guess it's approaching 18 years now, we've tried a lot of different verticals, and we've decided, especially over the last few years, to limit our focus and do what we're really good at. We do have a couple of spin-off companies that are, involved in other segments using our platform. Sports training is one with Yon Sports VR. But in the core company, we focus on 5 verticals. And besides manufacturing, which we're going to talk about here today, we're also in the medical and pharmaceutical markets, aerospace, energy, security. So this is training police, municipalities, EMTs for disaster scenarios, for instance. And the final one on top here is education. And in education, we really gravitate towards higher education with a focus on vocational training. So if you boil it down, that part is really training the technicians that's going to go out and operate the manufacturing equipment a little bit earlier in their career, or the MRO people. So it's very close to what we see being done in industry. We are a very mission-driven organization, and one of our key missions, as I mentioned initially here, is to address the needs of the just shy of 4 billion people in the world. They're either students or workers, and help them take the next step using technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality. Look at the workers. There's a huge amount of workers that over the next 20 years have a high risk, and this is backed by study after study around the world, have a high risk to be replaced by artificial intelligence and automation. So what do we do there? We have, at this point in time, so this will grow in the future, 1.3 billion students that struggle every day to do more, to learn more with less resources. It used to be the case that you could go into a career 20, 30 years ago, spend your lifetime there, and retire with a gold watch and ride into the sunset. We know that that's not the case anymore, and anyone going into the job market needs continuous education. And we think that VR will play a big role there in terms of accessibility and making it easy for students to do that. One of the big problems, as I mentioned here, is the disruption between technology that kills jobs and creates new ones. And we see this trend accelerating. There's also a gap of skilled workers. So one study in the US showed there's about 3.5 million manufacturing jobs available over the next decade, and it's expected that about 2 million will go unfilled due to lack of skills. So this is a serious challenge, and it's expected to be similar around the world. So how do we fill this growing gap? We think that there are two ways to do this. Either you could take the passive road, and this is not something we are supporting from Yon for sure, but if you go out and look at the discussions going on, one proposal is universal basic income. At Yon, we think there's a lot more to a job than that. Its purpose, its meaning, identity, and dignity, besides making a living and providing for your family. We think there's a much more positive scenario where we can help with this convergence of technologies between artificial intelligence, IoT, cloud computing, faster networks, which is a very important part as well, to empower these 3.8 billion people to take the next step and become AVR-empowered humans. Of course, there are certain things you can do today, but as we look forward over the next 20 years, there is going to be a lot of integration of technology between the human and the real or the virtual world. So we look forward to participating on that journey. From now on, I'll talk much more about what we can do today. But if you look at some of the future solutions, it's expected that we will have contact lenses that can display images at very high quality. We know that voice recognition AR is improving tremendously. We see investments in futuristic technologies such as neural lace, etc. But the interesting thing, if you park that thought, there's so much you can do today to really empower workers and students. So we're definitely in a very good position to start to do that very quickly, and then of course take advantage of new technologies as they come. Let's talk a little bit specifically now about industry manufacturing knowledge transfer problems. And this is something we see as common issues across the board. One is cost. There's a need to minimize time, resources spent on training, and at the same time, of course, maintaining high quality. Complexity, products, manufacturing processes, everything is becoming more complex, and the employees need to constantly learn and update more. Risk. We all know that risk to humans, to infrastructure, to environment are not acceptable anymore, and we need to take every step we can to avoid that. Well, VR and AR allows you that risk-free, safe environment where you can actually fail. And we know that through allowing students the possibility to fail, you'll learn a lot more. Other problems relate to quality. Talked a little bit about this initially, that traditional classroom learning does not provide the ideal environment for hands-on, skilled labor force training. Assessment, it's often difficult to assess how students are doing and certify them when they're ready. With VR and AR, we can do that in a totally different way, connecting directly with learning management systems and so forth. Let's talk about the AVR solution and how it connects with knowledge transfer. So we see that we can do faster learning. I shared that a little bit initially, some studies even, and we're happy to share more. We know that through devices, as we saw in one of the videos, using the HoloLens in a manufacturing environment, we'll talk more about that one in a second, you can serve up real-time contextual knowledge as you go through and assemble engine components in that case, or maybe you're doing maintenance repair operation on site. This, of course, also has the huge potential of removing in all, or at least in part, the need for training centers, educational facilities, because you can serve up the content right then and there. And safety, as we talked about already. We see across the board, but especially with the millennial workforce, a much bigger engagement using these types of technologies. I mean, they grew up with video games and social media, and you know, there's kind of expectation. And we've actually seen some interesting side effects. Recruitment actually improves just by having some of these modern training, knowledge transfer technologies, and that's viable in many different fields. And as I mentioned, assessment, linking this to other systems, making it much more efficient to assess. And of course, in a virtual simulated environment or augmented, you can track any event, any scenario, anything the student do in real time. So it's a very efficient way to do it. Coming back a little bit to this video we saw in the beginning. So we have the virtual trainer, and this is a solution where you connect one trainer, one student in most cases, and you can provide a remote, very, very hands-on, dynamic training environment. And I'll show a little video in a few minutes here that shows that a little bit better. Knowledge injection or AR assist, as we talked about. Here I'll show a video. This is something that we did for the CeBIT conference in Germany this year. And together with our customer, Tridonic. And Tridonic is a integrated lighting company, and they've developed this wonderful IoT connected solution. And you see the light panel there. Here we have a technician. In this modality that he showed there, he's doing commissioning. imagine you have a distribution center or a manufacturing facility where you have perhaps a few thousand of these lights, each have an IP address. You can point your tablet or your glasses. We're showing a tablet here to make it a little easier to see. And you can commission the whole site. That's very complicated to do today in the real world. Here's another one, maintenance. So you can also get overlaid on the actual device information like energy consumption, heat generation, either over a week, day by day, or over a day, hour by hour. The third use is that you can actually interact with the physical device, as we'll see here in a moment, and do things like control lighting. If it was a piece of machinery, you could control the machine, of course. So this is something that we really are heavily engaged in today. This is not future or science fiction by any means. This is something you can do today, just like we did with Tridonic in this case. And the IoT device and the light is connected to the cloud. The AR experience is connected to the cloud. So all the data comes through there. One question we often get is security, data security. And of course, we use standard secure networks, cloud-based or network-based, as you do with anything today. This shows a little video on using AR glasses instead, and we'll have more examples of that shortly. So that's an AR knowledge injection, AR assist application. The other part, which we'll look at a little bit less today, given time, but there's also a creation component where you can build knowledge modules. And this tool, which you can actually try out on the App Store or the Google Play, iTunes, it's called Yon Creator AVR, is geared towards teachers, training people, people in organizations that build instruction manuals and so forth. If you need more advanced simulations, there's also, of course, the possibility to do that through our IDC network and directly with Yon. So there's a couple of different levels there. Let's look a little bit at evolution of delivery methods. We know that historically we've been using classrooms for many types of learning. We've used e-learning for quite a few years, and we've used simulators. I'm thinking flight simulators. That's something that's been in use for many years. It's regulated. It's mandatory that you start in a flight simulator. But this also happens in other fields. I'm thinking things like a drill rig simulator in oil and gas. There are simulators for geophysical, so forth. But one challenge with these simulators is that they do one thing. And they're very difficult to move to another task. And that's where things like a virtual classroom, where you can use small virtual reality devices in the classroom or AR. You can use more 3D-based e-learning. In addition to simulators, you can use 3D simulators, virtual realities such as iCubes or HTC Vives or other virtual reality equipment. And the benefit with these systems is that you can very easily go from an offshore lift training operation to a manufacturing assembly procedure using the same device if you wanted. So they're much more flexible. And then, of course, we have the in-field augmented reality, which is adding a whole new dimension. And we are in the early stages of use of augmented reality. But as you'll see in a moment, when we look at what, for instance, analysts are saying, it's really accelerating quite dramatically over the next few years, which is very exciting. We also know that if we look at industry or manufacturing as a whole, that there is a decision window early in the process where you can make changes and it doesn't have a huge or as big impact on cost. And the more you can use virtual reality, augmented reality, instead of building prototypes and so forth, the bigger impact on the bottom line you will have here. Some of the key benefits from the AVR platform: efficiency, productivity. This is a framework that already exists. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Just populate it with new content, new modules, and so forth. Focus your development R&D on unique value add, and it's of course something we work together. And don't worry about everything else that's going on, all the noise, whether it's server, storage, OS, middleware integration, so forth. These solutions are fully customizable and can be branded to your own brand. So that's something we do. As a company, we have a view to be agnostic on hardware. So we look at your needs specifically before we even propose a hardware solution. We don't come in with one hardware solution like would be the case from many hardware developers. And of course, fast implementation. This is a key. You can implement solutions perhaps in a few weeks and really start to be productive much more quickly, thanks to what we've developed. Easy to use, off-the-shelf, end-to-end solution, cost efficiency. We provide this as a subscription service. So we put the entry bar very low. We're talking about, dollars per worker per month to get started. And of course, the more workers you get engaged with these solutions, the more cost effective this gets. Why now? As I mentioned a couple of times, we have this convergence of important trends. Of course, our focus here is the orange one, AVR, Augmented Virtual Reality. But this connected to IoT, cloud computing, AI is becoming more and more prevalent in most of our applications. You have this accessibility to smart devices. It's hard to keep track of how many billions of devices we have, and it's going to grow rapidly. Gartner says there will be 21 billion connected smart devices by 2020, many of them supporting AR and VR. So it becomes a natural way to interface for us humans with a lot of these advanced technologies and make it efficient to take data in and provide feedback. Other studies, this is also one from Gartner, I'll have a few more here in a moment, looking at HMDs for AR and VR, and they state by 2020, half of the top 50,000 companies in the world will have executed AVR projects. And we see, with the projects that we're involved in, that the pace of implementation is rapidly accelerating, and not only in manufacturing, but in energy, in medical, in aerospace, in security, in education. It's across the board. Goldman Sachs did a very good study here last year where they looked at non-gaming sources. So there's no doubt that some segments like VR HMDs were heavily influenced by gaming, which we in manufacturing and industry have been able to take advantage of in a very good way. But looking a little bit beyond that, 85%, according to Goldman Sachs, of VR growth will come from non-gaming sources. So enterprise, education, defense, so forth. And if you peek into their study a little bit more, it also shows that AR and VR software is going to be about half of the action, a little bit less than half, but roughly half, and hardware the other half. Other studies that look at AR versus VR, here's one from Markets and Markets from this year, that looking at the growth of AR versus VR, and there's no doubt, and most analysts agree with this, that AR will grow much more rapidly. It also has a much higher potential to impact the bottom line in terms of ROI and efficiencies with almost any industry. The interesting thing with this study is that it showed already in 2016, per this analyst, the AR market was larger than the VR market. And if you look out another 6 years in this case, but to 2022, it's going to be, almost 4x, which is quite interesting. So why should you go to Yon Reality? One thing is that I think we have more experience from real knowledge transfer applications than virtually anyone else in the world. We've been doing this since 1999. And we have a software platform, as we've talked about, easy to use tools, or professional tools. We can provide seamless distribution, white label. But we also understand the hardware market. It's quite difficult for someone that hasn't been in this business for a while to be able to tell if a technology is mature enough to invest further in. And to be honest, there's a lot of promising technologies out there, but almost without exception, it takes longer to develop good hardware than the hardware manufacturers want to admit. And we act a little bit like a clearinghouse. We check everything that's going on the market. We try to get involved early with technologies that we think have potential, try to provide input to help improve. But we're also very careful about not deploying hardware until it's ready. And this goes from the phone to the dome. There's quite a range of different hardware that can be used. And then, of course, applications. I looked at this a few months back, and since we started in 1999, as a company, we've been involved developing well over 1,000 different applications in different fields. But the experience that comes from that has helped us build up a large library that's ready for different VR devices, as well as a lot of expertise and experience with custom development. So this agnostic approach, I think, is very important and a big value we provide. There's a little image that shows this concept from a phone that you can hold in your hand, do AR, VR on, to a big dome where you can have a interactive, immersive experience together with a group of people, like a classroom and so forth. Looking a little bit where we've been and where we're going, up until about 2012, so the first 13 years of our existence, the VR AR market was not taking off. There was a lot of barriers. Hardware cost was one. Access to data, efficient tools, resources. So we spent a lot of time then doing customer projects and gained a lot of experience, as I mentioned. We started developing the modern AVR platform, which we launched this year in 2013. And we're going to continue to add some significant features here over the next few years. So we're very, very excited about that. Through this development process, we used this platform and features in various projects as we rolled this out. So we're very, very careful to bring in real customer feedback in terms of the needs, stability, and so forth. Global network. So this is the factories, not factories like in manufacturing, but digital factories that we have around the world. And today we have 23 sites. Started in Manchester in 2014. And we've built up these studios that can support development of applications, content, either specifically for you as a manufacturer or sometimes our own applications that we develop more broadly for training in education, for instance. And of course, as we roll out the platform, which is a subscription SaaS model, again to make the bar of entry easy and the ROI higher for using these technologies. We're targeting to reach 40 million students, trainees within our fold here over the next 4 years. One thing when you look at AR and VR, and this is one of the challenges, and you in the manufacturing segment, you're very familiar with this, is that the AR VR that you see is kind of the tip of the iceberg. Under this, you have a lot of enterprise integration, CAD system, learning management systems, analytics, database systems, business systems, hardware. So it really takes someone with experience to be able to implement efficiently solutions for enterprise and what we're talking about today specifically for manufacturing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the AVR platform and actually more than that, show some videos. So let me start with an example from a virtual trainer video. And this is a trainer that connects remotely with a student using HTC Vive.
During this demonstration, I'm going to play as the trainer who's going to connect to one of our trainees, who is going to be in another simulation inside the HTC Vive. As a trainer, the first thing that we can see on here is that I've got Chris's facial avatar and his hand controllers. Right now we are following him around the scene and we're looking at his interactions. Before we start the task today, I'm going to just talk through this interface. On the top left hand we have the list of instructions Chris needs to complete to pass this test. On the second and any parts of the environment. I also have some camera controls. Yes. Right now I'm looking at this environment as if he is. So Chris, the first thing I want you to do is go to the left hand drawer of the fryer.
Left hand drawer. Okay.
To make this obvious to Chris, exactly which fryer it is that we're going to be working on today, I'm going to highlight this door for him. By selecting highlight, we now have visual references on both applications, exactly what it is I'm talking about. This application combines two-handed and one-handed interactions depending on the object that Chris is interacting with. The door, for example, is a one-handed interaction. Chris, could you mind opening this door for me?
Sure thing. There we go.
As Chris said,
I'm going to pause the sound there a little bit. So the trainer that's guiding Chris here through the procedure, and obviously this is a restaurant health and safety application. There could be a piece of machinery or something like that. The trainer is joining the session here via his or her laptop or tablet if you want to. And the trainee is joining via an HTC Vive gaming device. I think they sell for under $600 today to do what you see here. And then using a standard network. I was just in Iowa at the launch of our new IDC together with the Eastern Iowa Technical College, and connected through my mobile 4G network, and had one of our associates from Manchester actually join me as a trainee and did the session live. So you can do this on existing infrastructure, nothing extreme or costly is required. And that was one of our goals with this. Moving forward, we're going to take a look at a few other things. And one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is AR Assist. And we showed a video here initially that had aspects of this. But this is a project that we did based on the HoloLens between Yon Reality and Opel. And this was a EU-funded manufacturing project looking at new technologies. It was a 3-year project, and we actually finished it this year and showed it in Germany for the first time. So let's take a look at what we're doing here with this one using AR-assisted manufacturing.
A collaboration between Yon Reality, LMS Patras University, and Opel. By using Microsoft HoloLens in a robot cell, the user gets virtual instructions for assembly. LIA has received funding from the European Union's 7th Framework Programme for Research. While the robot is working, a warning message is seen in the HoloLens, and the worker has to stand back. Else, the robot arm movement will either be slower, or if the worker is too close to the robot, it will stop completely. Once the robot has finished its first task, the worker can see instructions in HoloLens to pick the manifold from the tray and place it on the turbocharger housing. An arrow is guiding the worker to where the manifold shall be placed. Once the manifold is in place, the worker will press a task completed button on the Android watch. Then the next instruction is seen. The worker is now picking up 3 nuts and mount them where the arrows are pointing. Once completed, again the worker will press the task completed button on the Android watch.
Okay, Vasilis, today thank you for
Okay, so that was one example of something that's been done over the last 3 years. Creator we talked about, and again, feel free to download that as you look at these solutions. Let me talk a little bit about our hubs. So this is a place that really helps implement and deploy a VR platform. And we know that many of you have a global footprint, and we know it's extremely important to get local support, localization. So that's all what this is about. It also provides a global network of knowledge content factories to develop AVR applications and services. And of course, we have senior experts as well as a lot of artists, programmers, project managers that work in teams at these sites to implement AVR solutions. We develop the talent through a school at each of these sites where we take in students, and we actually spend 1 year getting them ready for this job. 4 months theory and the remainder up to 1 year working on real projects, building a portfolio. And each of these sites are a sustainable profit center, which is extremely important as well, that everyone that participates in this is successful. And we've had a very good track record there as the need for AVR solution is growing rapidly. As I mentioned, we have 23 up and running, 7 more in the works, and we're targeting within the next 3 years to develop 20 IDC Hubs. So these are very large centers and connected to up to 50 satellites around the world. And as you can see, we have a really global perspective on this. Let's go and look at some case studies. So this is a brief snapshot of customers we work within energy, manufacturing, aerospace, medical, and so forth. And this is one example that we're doing from our office in France, where we're working with UIMM on manufacturing applications around aerospace. and we're developing one module based on the virtual trainer. And there are, after survey with the factory workers, they came up with, if I recall correctly, several hundred ideas on how to use these technologies to build efficiencies. This is a very exciting one. If you're interested in more information about any of these case studies, please reach out to our marketing team through the webinar, and they'll be happy to connect you with someone at Eon to share more. We don't want to take too much time here, but if you have that interest, please feel free or submit a question or an email at the end. This one we already talked about. Here's another one that we developed for automotive training, and here we use slightly different technology than the HoloLens. So we use something called ODG R7. This is a little bit more lightweight, Android-based AR device. And the technician is connecting the headphones here and placing the glasses on, so you can get both visual and audio information.
Step-by-step instructions. Gaze at the buttons on top to navigate place the AR marker on the transmission oil pan.
So this module is used to train automotive technicians to do different MRO procedures.
These bolts are not reusable. Remove.
I'm going to fast forward here to show a little bit the AR view. So there we start to get instructions to remove the oil pan, and this is overlaid. By the way, so right now we see a marker-based solution. As we move forward, there will be a lot of other different solutions to trigger inside-out tracking, CAD-based object tracking, geolocation, and many more. So there's a lot of development there. This is another application that we developed for Atlas Copco, one of the largest compressor manufacturers in the world. And this one we developed to allow Atlas Copco, we have a web-based interface actually, configure and develop AirNet or connections to their compressors, to various equipment used in the manufacturing site. General Electric, we've been working with GE Energy, GE Transportation, as well as GE Software. And GE Software is building one of the largest industrial internet applications or IoT applications called Predix in the world. And we've developed several VR modules for their development community, where you can do remote or where you can do repairs in the field, getting real-time data from different IoT devices. In Singapore, we have a large mining R&D center where we develop a number of knowledge solutions around mining using cave technology or iCube technology that we see in the pictures here, or more modern HMD-based technology as well. There are pros and cons with each one of them. Here we see a mining wayfinding application in VR. So this is a view from a Oculus HMD point of view. With Festo, that's a didactic training company in Germany, we've developed a wonderful series of applications for aquatronics or wastewater management. And this is something we're continuing and we'll actually show some new modules this year. But basically it's modules to learn how to do different procedures in a wastewater facility. So these can be standard operating procedures, or it can be situations, for instance, where you have bad weather, flooding, you have to take emergency measures and so forth. So that's what this particular section here is showing. You can see the dark clouds over there. So we have to make sure we prepare for the storm that's coming, so to speak. So that's aquatronics. There are many other projects, so I'll just mention a few. Here's another one that we developed together with one of our partners in the UK called TSC. They develop training simulators for console operators, primarily for the education market. So what we've done together is that we've connected a real environment with their educational console, so we can get real data into the VR application. And here the student is using HTC Vive to navigate around the plant, and they get instructions real time. They have to sign off. And once they start to operate the plant, the virtual plant gets data from the simulator. So the pressure, the temperature, the mixing, wherever it may be, gets information directly from the simulator. And I think this is an approach that can be used in many, at least continuous process manufacturing type applications. Technical colleges, I want to mention that as well. There are aspects there that we can definitely do. Temasek Polytechnic, we have worked with them for many years and developed applications around manufacturing and aerospace, to be specific. If you would like to explore these, you can do that through the Creator AVR that I mentioned earlier. And of course there you can explore it on your phone. If you go visit Temasek in Singapore, you can explore it on one of their iCubes in full scale. This is a really interesting project that we did a couple of years ago in UNIDO in Ethiopia. They had a challenge to deliver training in a more cost-efficient way to truck drivers. And this was done with Volvo Trucks and UNIDO in a combination. And we developed a AR-based learning module that the technicians could learn basic diesel mechanics. And we were able to do this at a cost of a few dollars, basically about the same price as a can of soda or a can of Coke, since they already had the phones and the networks built out. This became a very successful way to do it, and the students were extremely happy. Looking forward a little bit as we wrap up this presentation, I think the biggest opportunity looking forward is what we refer to as the knowledge worker market. We know that over the next 3 to 5 years, we will have wearable technology that will allow us to get information then and there in the field, and we'll be able to augment the knowledge, the capabilities of the worker. And I think if it's one thing I would recommend, it's really good time to dip your toe in the water and start to look at perhaps a pilot project, see how this can apply to your industry, because it is going to be a game changer. The cost savings, efficiencies of this view towards the future will eclipse anything we've seen today. So I think getting engaged and starting to learn more about this is really important. It's not something where you push a button and you start to use this. You have to prepare the data, your process, delivery. And we've seen, especially in the last year, large manufacturers around the world really engaging and doing this. So it's a high time to join on the bandwagon, so to speak. And then recapping a little bit, what's driving this is the convergence of these very important technology trends for the future. And if you go out and talk to analysts or look at other things that are happening in your organization, I'm sure you see the same. And again, there's no more natural way for your coworkers, your experts to access this data than through augmented reality. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for spending the last 45 minutes or so together with me. And I'm going to hand it back to our marketing team, and we'll take some questions. Thanks again.